Hello out there. We're actually live with my first television show on E360. So I tell you, we got a lot of great information coming your way. But you might have to make you wait a little bit because I'm going to play a little banner music and a little introduction. Then I'm going to come back and really introduce the show. So I got this absolutely fantastic guest that you all are going to meet later. Her name is Paula Shaw. Been knowing her a long, long time. She's a very good friend of mine. But let me introduce you to a little bit of E360 before we start this show, so you guys get a little bit of understanding of what it is. Hey, I'm James Cooley, the host of E360. It's Your Life, the James Cooley Show, which I tell you, I want you to watch because we're going to encourage people to dream big, think big, and be big at everything they do. We're going to have absolutely fantastic guests that are going to come on that's going to inspire each and every last one of us. And we are going to work together because we are a team. And you always have heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a kid or communities and all of these other type of things. That's what we're going to do with the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life on E360 television, on 31 different podcasts, on the radio, streaming, radio, TV. I hope you join us real soon. It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley. See you soon. How you doing out there? Hey, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life, E360 TV, also streaming on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, several different mechanisms. Hey, I am so happy to be here and hosting my first James Cooley Show. It's Your Life. We are going to talk about a lot of great things today. One of the things I want to talk about, and I think that's so important that we all get a better understanding of this, we're going to talk about grief and how it's related to PTSD, post traumatic syndrome disorder. And I got one of my very, very good friends, Paula Shaw, who has been on my show several times. Actually, I was on her show. I got my start from her show. And Paula and I are going to talk a little bit about that. But Paula had to be the first of everything because she gave me my start in radio. She was my first guest on my national show. And she'd been on my show a couple more times, but it's only befitting that she is my first guest on my first television show. So uh, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this great lady. I mean, she do so many things. Yeah. Plus, I mean, she absolutely dropped dead gorgeous. I mean, I love Paula to death. She do so many things, but most importantly, she understands what it like, what is like to grieve, what it is like to have someone to talk to. She understands what it's like to be able to comfort others in time of need. And she's been doing this for quite some time. And I tell you, she's one of the best in the business. She's an author of several books. And I'm just going to give you a quick description before I bring this great lady. First of all, the title of the show is just like I mentioned to you, is how do we deal with greed as it relate to PTSD. And so, one of the things that we're gonna get a chance to understand is that first of all, we're gonna get a chance to know Paula Shaw. She's a transitional coach, grief specialist, best-selling author, speaker, talk show host. I mean, she do it all. And we really gonna get an understanding of learning how greed play a major part, especially in PTSD today. And we're going to discuss the issues that veterans and others face when it comes to warrior mentality and a lot of other things that affect us in life. But most importantly, we're going to discuss this nonprofit that she supports fully, called the Voices of Heroes. And I tell you, just sit back and you can ask questions, or the text messages and all of that stuff is wide open. So you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and ask this great lady any question that you might want to ask. So I tell you, before I bring her on, I'm going to bring a short video that talks about some of the things that she is doing, and as it relates to helping us quote with grief and a lot of other things. So I just want everybody to be part of this, and let's.
Hi, I'm Paula Shaw. If you're reading this book, it's probably because you're dealing with some kind of emotional pain brought about by a loss or a life transition. And right now, I'll bet all you want more than anything else is just to feel normal again. Losses and life transitions create change, and with change always comes discomfort. Sometimes it's a smaller kind of discomfort, kind of like little waves playing around your knees. But sometimes it's like a damn tsunami crashing down on you and tearing your world apart. That's how it was for me the summer that I lost my former husband and my dog of 14 years within a month of each other. It was a really difficult, devastating time for me and my two children. But because I had those two children and I had clients who were depending on me, I had to heal and try and get my life back together as quickly as possible. So I started doing a lot of research, and I started thinking about the tools I'd used over the years that had been really effective with clients. And every single day, I did something. I used some tool or I did some process to try to help myself heal. And it worked so well that 2 months later, I was sitting with a new client. He was in tears and he was devastated because he had just lost his dog. I looked at him and I said, I don't know exactly how you're feeling, but I have a pretty good idea because I too lost my dog very recently. He asked me when, and when I told him 2 months ago, he was incredulous. In fact, he was a little bit suspicious as he looked at me and said, Are you on meds? I chuckled and I said, No. And then he said, How did you do it? And that question actually is what led to me writing this book. I started thinking about how had I done it. And I decided I wanted to compile a truly helpful arsenal of tools to help you and others work through their grief journeys. In this book, I've done just that. I've given you tools and processes and information to help you on your healing journey to move through your pain, but at your own pace. Because no two people will go through this healing journey in exactly the same way or the same amount of time. But you're not going to have to do it alone. I'm going to be with you every step of the way.
Wow. Without any further delay, let's bring Paula Shaw. How you doing, Paula? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, James? Good to see you.
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. And anytime that I'm in your presence, chatting with you, I'm doing even better. You know, so,
Thank you.
I was watching that your video.
Mhm.
I watched several of them, but I thought that this one would be the best one to introduce you, and also to introduce our great topic that we're talking about, grief,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and how that affect not just the military, but how that affect everyone.
Hmm.
Um, I tell you, there's no better person that I would rather have talking about this topic than you. And our listening audience, Paul and I go back way back, and she gave me my first opportunity in a lot of things. I mean, first of all, on her show, uh, prior to the second show that she had, invited me to come on the show. I think that was about 6 years ago, Paul. I'm not sure.
Wow. Has it been that long? That's true, because it was a couple years before the pandemic, and everything has sort of been distorted since the pandemic, time-wise, for sure.
Uh-huh. And that's gave me. I think we met at the Rotary Club, at the
Hmm.
Rancho Santa Fe Rotary Club, and you
Yes, we
invited us.
did. Uh-huh.
And also she gave me my first opportunity when I wrote my book to be a guest on her show, and that
Hmm.
turned out to be a blessing. But actually, everything that I touched base with Paula has turned out to be a blessing.
Well, you're the only person I ever introduced to the station manager who got offered a show on the spot. So it just must have been a God shot for sure, because that didn't happen all the time.
But Paul, I want to talk about this topic. And first of all, you are a grief specialist. Can
Mhm.
you tell our listeners exactly what is a grief specialist?
Well, primarily, I specialize. Now I kind of think of myself more as a life transition specialist, because grief, I do have special certification in helping people recover from grief. And I've spent a lot of years doing a lot of reading and a lot of research and a lot of work with grieving people. And so I am a specialist in that I've put a lot of time in developing that expertise. It's a lot of looking at loss and grief and working with people and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I think, besides having certification as a grief specialist, I'm also very experienced, all these years, both in my own life and in working with clients. There's been a lot of grief. I've been actually very fortunate in that some of the big losses that so many people have, like losing your parents, I haven't been through that. I'm thrilled to say my parents are 93 and 96, and they're still alive, and we're still having a wonderful relationship. But I've certainly been through a lot of other kinds of losses with my clients.
Well, how do we tie this into PTSD? And the reason I asked that question is because I spent 23 years in the military, and we know about firefighters, police, everybody in their life for services.
Right.
And sometimes we experience certain type of trials and tribulations and triumph that pushes us in the corner. Can you explain to our listening audience a little bit about how grief can also affect PTSD?
Sure. First of all, I think it's important that we delineate for everybody that PTSD is often experienced by military personnel, but it's not exclusive to military. Anybody who experiences a traumatic experience, that could be a natural disaster, it could be getting robbed or raped or anything that can happen to any normal everyday person, that can produce the trauma that then becomes post-traumatic stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder is kind of like the word grief in that it's a word that has a lot of pieces and parts. So grief is a word that actually encompasses a compendium of lots of emotions. It could be anger, it could be anxiety, it could be fear, could be sadness, could be inability to focus and function, inability to sleep. So grief has a lot of different pieces, as does post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people experience flashbacks. Some people experience confusion, disorientation, alienation. But so both are sort of catch-all words that describe many, many, many different kinds of experiences. And not everybody has the same set of experiences. You know, some people never have a hallucination in their post-traumatic stress. They may just be very fearful and anxious. And then others have flashbacks, hallucinations, that kind of thing. So they're very connected. And one other connection I definitely want to say is I think post-traumatic stress is like really intense grief. Because why is the body going through all it's going through? Why does the brain create all this symptomology? Because it's intensely sad and intensely distressed because it's gone through something horrific.
I want you to hold that thought. We're going to take a station break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a whole lot more about post-traumatic syndrome or disorder. And we're also going to talk about Paula, her show, and a lot of other things. So I tell you what, stay tuned. We'll be back shortly with more It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley, and our special guest, Paula Shaw.
Really get a chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, or hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? And everything that you do. If you can see it here, you can do it. You might not be able to see it with the physical eyes, but if you can see it here, you can do it. Don't let anyone tell you that you cannot do it.
Welcome back to It's Your Life. I'm James Cole. I got my very special guest, my friend. I love her to death. And we're talking about grief as it relates to PTSD. And I tell you, just like in that video that I just showed, not just with our youth and young adults, but with everybody, you have to believe in yourself. Even when you're pushed back in the corner, even when you experience grief, you have to be able to know yourself,
Yes.
accept yourself, love yourself before you share yourself. And I think that a lot of time grief, we fall into a corner because we are feeling sad, unhappy about some of the things that happen to us in life. I want to pick it up with that, Paula. A little bit. I know you was going in right before the break. You was explaining a couple of things as relate to grief. Can you pick it up?
Well, I think what I was saying is so often, first of all, there's a kind of a big misunderstanding out there that usually when you hear the word grief, you think of death, don't you? And I think most people do. And so they don't realize that grief is the normal, natural response to loss. And loss comes in many flavors and many packages. It could be a divorce. It could be a health loss. It could be moving or losing your job. There are all sorts of losses that people experience. And when we experience the removal of something we value, the normal, natural response is called grief. Now, if that loss is compounded with a trauma, like, you can't turn on the news anymore without seeing some heartbroken mother whose child was killed or whose husband, we keep seeing all these horrible shootings and things going on. Now you're taking a loss and you're combining it with true trauma, something that's shocking and so far out of the ordinary, and then if you were part of that experience, then you can evolve the symptomology of PTSD as well. But I really believe PTSD and grief have many, many, many commonalities.
I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day. You said that this month you are focusing on to change it up, really. You're focusing on PTSD and
yes,
and veterans. What do you feel are the biggest problems that the veterans face?
There are so many things, James. I mean, it's a group I really want to do more work for because, well, think about this. We regular folk who are not necessarily military, it's like we always dream about retiring, right? That day when you don't have to get up at the crack of dawn and get ready for the office and fight your way through the traffic, retiring. But what actually happens in reality is retirement's a grief experience, because look at all the losses involved. The loss of your daily schedule, the loss of your friends at work, the loss of purpose, the loss of, a familiar routine. There are all these losses. So now imagine that you're trained for military service. And when that service ends, and especially if it ends abruptly because you were wounded or, have suffered some physical loss, who are you? What do you do? What do you know how to do? How do you now transition into the regular world? And so that's a huge one. Financially, you don't make big bucks in the military. And we all have this sort of idea that the government takes care of you when you're in the military. You don't make great money. And you may have a wife and children that you're trying to provide for with what you have. So that can be a very difficult transition, especially here in San Diego, where I am. These guys get out of Camp Pendleton and they love the weather and they love the area, but it costs a lot to live in San Diego. So who's got that kind of a budget coming fresh out of the service? And these are just some small considerations. I think a little later we're going to get into the warrior's dilemma and what happens really when you go from being this trained protector / killer back into normal society.
As you know, I spent 23 years in the military.
Yes.
You're right. It doesn't pay a whole lot. But one thing that it does, it provides us with a sense of pride that we are protecting, America, our families, and others. And a lot of times I believe that we, as military, as a veteran, we give a lot, and a lot of folks don't understand the stress, the difficulties that being away from home, not seeing your kids. In my case, being out on that water for months and months at a time, that caused all type of stress and grief. And you don't forget about those things, Paula, when you get out the service. I mean, you don't forget about them. And say if you're fortunate enough to do 20 or more, in my case, all of those things are still there. And many times when we come out, we think about all the things that happened to us when we was in, and sometimes we fall into depression, and many of us do not want to reach out and get help. What would you tell veterans or just anybody that might be experiencing those type of thoughts? What would you tell them on how should they reach out and get help and kind of put pride to the side?
Yes, you know what I would say? Hey guys, it's 2022. There's no stigma anymore about getting help, getting therapy. You're hearing commercials about it now on every show, every podcast, because we've realized that there are certain traumas that we go through in life, certain difficult experiences, and we just need help to get through them. And there's no shame in that, in getting that help. We have to have it because it's just something that's above and beyond what we've ever experienced before. And I love the point that you made, James, about depression sometimes being part of it. I mean, you had an identity as a military man for a long time. And, in my family, my husband was a Marine, his father was a Marine, and his grandfather was a Marine Corps general. And you know the old saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. So there was a whole identity attached to being a Marine. And, part of that is about being tough and being able to protect people and defend the country. So, of course, it doesn't seem in sync with being a Marine or being any protector to now march into the therapist's office. But that's not true anymore. Everybody gets it. And everybody knows about PTSD. And everybody knows that you can't get through it without help. And the VA has some wonderful help that is either free or very low cost. In fact, one of the people I interviewed on my show this month that I think was an incredible interview on Change It Up Radio, I would encourage people to really seek that show out. His name is Dylan Bender. And Dylan Bender is a therapist with the VA. And he is the man that helped my father, who had 66 years of PTSD, being a veteran of the Normandy invasion, because it wasn't okay to get help. He didn't know what to do. He just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And he was afraid if people knew the crazy thoughts he was having or the things that were going through his head, the flashbacks and all that, that they would put him in a psych ward. And he had done some work in a psych ward when he was doing his training as a medic. And he was terrified of going to a psych ward. So he didn't tell anybody for 66 years. And then he found Dylan. And first, actually, I want to say, in all humility, that it was partly because of going through one of my grief groups. I had this 12-week grief program people were going through. Dad came through it. And that's when he first realized he was grieving, that he had all this loss he suffered during the war, and he needed to get some help. So the next step was Dylan Bender, and what an amazing man.
Wow. You know, that's amazing. You was able to get your father to come to your program.
Oh, my parents support me in everything. They're the best.
Oh, yeah.
They're the first ones to line up. They both actually went through the program.
You know, Paula, why is it so difficult for veterans to find jobs and maintain jobs after they have done a lengthy time in the service?
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. There are a couple of reasons. For one reason, when you go through boot camp, as you well know, they change you. And because you have to survive in war, particularly in combat, you have to follow orders without question. But you're following orders that you believe somebody who knows what the hell they're doing is giving. They're giving those orders because they are leaders who are qualified to be leaders. Now, fast forward, let's say you get a job selling insurance and you realize that the manager of your office is not so sharp. He's not so bright. And some of the things he's telling you, you don't think are correct at all. It's very hard to keep working for somebody that you don't respect, that you don't think really knows what he's talking about, or she. You know, I'm sure you can relate to that, James, because you were one of the officers, so you knew who the sharp people were. And you know what often happens to veterans? They either really go downhill because they can't hold down a job, or like you, they become entrepreneurs because they don't want anybody else giving them orders. They want to be able to tell themselves what to do.
You're absolutely right. That is a problem most of the time because due to the trauma and the things that we experience in the military, it's kind of hard to adjust once you get out. You know, but I tell you, we're going to take a station break, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the warrior mentality. We're going to pick it up. We're going to talk about a lot of other things. So I want everybody to stay tuned because this wonderful woman right here is going to continue to educate us. We'll be back shortly after the break. It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley. Hey, I'm James Cooley, the host of E360. It's Your Life, the James Cooley Show, which I tell you, I want you to watch because we're going to encourage people to dream big, think big, and be big at everything they do. We're going to have absolutely fantastic guests that are going to come on that's going to inspire each and every last one of us. And we are going to work together because we are a team. And you always have heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a kid or communities and all of these other type of things. That's what we're going to do with the James Cooley Show. It's Your Life on E360 television, on 31 different podcasts, on the radio, streaming, radio, TV. I hope you join us real soon. It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley. See you soon.
My program is built on the 4 C's, and the 4 C's are create. Create is the thoughts that we have. Each and every last one of us have these thoughts, these ideas, these dreams. We have these things every day. A lot of times when we get these thoughts, we don't want to do anything but lay down and go back to sleep or whatever that might be, and we wake up and the thoughts are gone. I believe that a high spirit always telling us something every single day. Every single day. So create the ideals that you get, that you think about, that you dream of. You say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it.
Welcome back to It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley, and like I said, I got this absolutely fantastic guest, Paula Shaw, and she is educating us, and she is also talking about some of the things, tough topics. Many of us don't want to talk about things like this because we want to try to handle it by ourselves, and we don't want to reach out and get help when we need it. And I encourage everyone to reach out, get help. And especially if you're having any type of issues or concerns or grief, Paula Shaw is that person. She's that person. She has several books out, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. That I am fascinated to have gotten a copy of a signed copy of those books.
Of course.
I tell you that I think everybody needs to reach out and see some of her work, and it's going to help you through everything that you do. So, hey, Paul, I want to talk about the warrior's mentality and how does that create problems for veterans and former military personnel?
That is just such an important topic. And I think it's really important for people to understand it better. And again, I want to credit Dylan Bender for having explained it to me in this podcast I mentioned earlier. So what happens is if we use the analogy of sheep and wolves and sheepdogs, okay, so all of us running around here are like this great herd of sheep. And we're all doing okay. We figure out how to connect with the other sheep. But now we separate out some of those sheep and we turn them into sheepdogs. And we teach them they are not sheep anymore. They're the protectors of the sheep and the ones that guide the sheep. So the sheep know what to do. Now, the bad guys, they're the wolves, and we have those too. And the sheepdogs are going to try to protect the sheep from the wolves. So now, in basic training, they remake you physically, mentally, and spiritually, right? Because they have to get you to a place where you will run toward fire. And that is not normal for human beings. Even a one-celled amoeba moves away from painful stimuli when it's introduced in a lab. We have millions of cells, and every one of them wants to get the hell out of Dodge when there's danger around. But a military man is taught to move toward the danger, right? You've been there, James.
Oh, yeah.
And so now, and literally when I was doing my internship, James, I had a man say to me, I was on the streets of Hanoi one day and the streets of San Francisco the next. There was no debrief. There was no transition time. There was no counseling, no work with this man to help him adjust from being a sheepdog going back amongst the sheep. So then you know what happens. They're so disoriented. They're so mixed up. They don't know who they are, what their purpose is, where they belong. And so isolation and confusion and hurt and anger and all these emotions set in. And too often, people choose to soothe all that pain with alcohol, drugs, or some other form of dysfunction.
Wow.
And that is the warrior's dilemma.
Wow. Just continue talking about that. Can you tell us some of those affected things that may be useful in keeping our veterans from going down the path of suicide, and because that's a major problem right now.
Yes.
So can we
it's huge. And I'm so glad you asked me that, James, because this is one of the things I'm most passionate about helping to prevent. So, of course, when you feel alienated and isolated, you don't know who you are, what your purpose is. It's kind of hard to know, why should I keep living, especially if I'm in pain. But and 50% of the suicides that they find are military who weren't even in combat. It's just, but now that's this identity thing, right? And again, remember everybody that PTSD is not just exclusive to military, but this warrior's dilemma, this reintegration syndrome, which is what we're really talking about right now, that is usually particular to military. But I recently realized it's also the same with NFL players, because they're trained to be warriors too, aren't they? So, what they have found, though, and this is the good news, that when you find a community or a group that has meaning to you, that you connect with and become part of, the suicide rate goes down to 4%, James. 4%. And so recently on my shows that I've been doing this month, I interviewed Tony Perez, who has a nonprofit called Operation Game On. He takes military veterans who've lost limbs, and once they have their prosthetics, he teaches them to play golf. And they become part of this group of people playing golf. And that has been major in preventing suicide, because now they belong somewhere. They have something to focus on. I interviewed Tammy Olivic, who has a nonprofit called Saddles in Service. They bring the military personnel or whoever's dealing with PTSD. They're also working with first responders, fire, police. These people are experiencing PTSD as well. And she gets them working with horses, riding horses, caring for the horses, working with horses that now something else needs them. They're connected with something other than themselves that gives them a sense of belonging and a sense of connection. And so I think that kind of work is critical. And you know what? Belonging to a church, a good church that you feel really connected with. They're also seeing the statistics that can become that community that you feel is important in your life and that you matter to. So we got to connect them.
Yeah, I believe that most important thing, you have to have something in your life that you belong to, or that's meaningful to you.
Yes.
That's going to get your mind away from the negative thoughts.
Yes.
And I can contest that in the military, as a veteran, we don't always feel that we belong. I mean, when we come out, and sometimes we just don't feel that way anyway, and we need to reach out to certain organizations, like you mentioned, nonprofits, professionals, grief.
I'm glad you said professionals, because that's actually a part of it I forgot. Once you get some kind of treatment going, the suicide rate goes way down to professionals. And whether it's through the VA or a private therapist or a coach, someone that you feel you can connect to is really important.
Well, hey, Paula, in your work, how do you try to help people dealing with PTSD and reintegration syndrome? How do you work with them to help them find the necessary needs and professionals that can help them?
Well, in my work, because I'm a person who works with energy psychology. I don't just do talk therapy. So those of us in the field of energy psychology, we're working with meridian points, like they use in acupuncture. We're working with the biofield, the subconscious mind, the chakras, the energy centers of the body. So what we're finding, and there's a lot of great research on EFT, emotional freedom technique, and other TFT, thought field therapy, which all focus on tapping meridian points. So I just came back from the energy psychology conference, and I saw footage of people after catastrophes, really awful things like what we're seeing going on in Ukraine right now. And they would just, while the people are talking about this horrible thing that happened to them, we're tapping certain meridian points. And what we know from Harvard studies is that sends calming signals to the amygdala, the part of the brain that prepares you for fight, flight, or freeze. And then your response becomes more neutral. So I try to use these kinds of tools because, for one thing, if we don't get some kind of a shift soon, early on in the therapy, people just get so discouraged. They won't stay with it, particularly these warriors that you and I have been talking about. So the great thing about these energy psychology modalities is they move people more quickly and give them hope because they actually experience a shift. And we just keep working with it until they can tune into the memories or the terrible, tragic thing they experienced and have a kind of neutral response to it rather than feeling like hysterical or angry or whatever the emotion might be.
Wow, I tell you, we're gonna take a station break. We're gonna come back. When we come back, I want to delve off into your podcast and all the great things that you're doing out there. So I tell you, if you got any questions that you want to ask Paula, go ahead and put them in the comments. We'll make sure that she get them. We're gonna take a station break. We'll be back shortly. It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley. Welcome back to It's Your Life. I'm James Cooley, and I tell you, I got my very good friend Paula Shaw, and I told you that she was going to educate us on tough topics that most people don't even talk about, and that's what she's doing right now. So again, I want to thank E360 TV for giving me an opportunity to bring my show even in another realm. And to go along with the podcasts and also the streaming networks, wherever you might be watching this at. We got so many great shows coming your way. And, we're going to have Paula Shaw again real soon. We ain't done with her right now, but Paula knows that I always ask her, I said, Paula, I got to get you on the show at least every 2-3 months.
That's the truth. You have said that.
So Paula, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. I mean, it's wonderful, and I want you to tell our audience what it's about. How they can tune in, and on some of the great things that you talk about on your show.
Thank you, James. That's so sweet of you to ask about it. It is kind of my passion project. It's called Change It Up Radio. And I originally created it because I wanted a format to either spotlight change makers who are trying to make the world a better place, or to bring information to people to help them cope better with change, to make it smoother and more productive. Because change is like the one thing we can count on, right? If you love your life or you hate your life, hang on, because change is going to come. But we humans, we are not comfortable with the unfamiliar. And so when even a change we want, like getting married, creates discomfort because we're not used to not living the way we did before when we were single. And like I mentioned earlier, retirement, even though we may be looking forward to it all our lives, the change brings discomfort because we no longer have the familiar all around us. And so Change It Up Radio does just that. And as I mentioned this month, because we're looking at Memorial Day coming up and the anniversary of D-Day, early June, I decided to focus all the shows on veterans and people serving veterans. And what heartwarming, gut-wrenching things have been shared with me on these shows. You know, there are people who, like Raina Ganji, who devotes her life, she's not even being paid, to just talking to people and trying to talk them off the ledge, so to speak, so that they don't become suicidal and take action on that thought. And like I mentioned, the two nonprofits we were just talking about. And then I, along with Amy Scruggs and some other women, are now forming, well, actually, Amy created this a few years back, and it just showed up at the perfect moment in time. We have a nonprofit called Voice for Heroes. And our goal is going to be to give either businesses, we're not just going to focus on nonprofits, although, you know, we all love nonprofits because their whole mission is trying to serve. But there are businesses out there like Surf Buddies who create these adorable stuffed animals totally out of recycled plastic. And so we want to give a format, a platform to people who are the heroes out there, who are trying to help Mother Earth, or who are trying to help the inhabitants of Mother Earth. And there are so many people with so many needs. I mean, I joke with my children that I really can't afford to watch CNN anymore because every time there's a commercial, I'm signing up for another thing I'm going to donate to. You know, there's the animals and there's the children and there's the elephants and you know, so many things. I look at my bank account and I go, oh my God, what have I done? But you can't watch those videos and not do something, right?
You have to. I mean, it's so many folks out there, so many organizations that need help. And we have to have an open heart because
Yes.
we need
Yep.
help as well. We need help. And when we give, that's therapy, at least from me.
Hmm.
When I can
Hmm.
help others out, it's so rewarding because it always come back
Yes.
tenfold.
Yes,
But Paul,
absolutely.
you mentioned something about change. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to want to change and adjust to change? Because change is inevitable.
Well, you know, there's probably a lot of neuroscience that I could get into. You know, I mean, the brain kind of gets stuck in ruts, right? But we now know there's something called neuroplasticity, which means we can change our brains. But humans just tend to be, you know, James, like I was watching you in the commercial breaks. You know, when you speak, there is no sort of doing it about you. You are in there, you are doing it, you know, you're passionate. And you've always been that way in everything you do. And ever since I've met you, I see that about you. But a lot of humans are not that way. They just want to be comfortable. They just want it to be easy. You know, those of us who've taken the entrepreneurial path, we're not the norm. And I think that for a lot of people, the disruption in the norm is just too much. And let's face it, you know, I was just reading something yesterday about what humans on this planet have been through in the last 3 years. And it was like, you know, first we had the pandemic, and life as we knew it completely ceased to exist and everything changed. Then there's a recession. And just when we think we may be out of the woods, well, now the COVID numbers are up again. And then Russia invades Ukraine. So it's like we're all going, whoa, 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 whoa. And we're wiped out. We're wiped out. It's been so much for us to assimilate and cope with. And I think most people just don't have the tolerance. So they just don't want anything to change. Just leave it safe, leave it the same, leave it comfortable. And that's the deal.
You know, hey, Paula, so we're down to the last 3-4 minutes of the show. There's a couple of questions that I certainly want to get in. How do you help people as a life transition coach? Or what is your purpose? What is your dreams in making sure that we do all we can to bring healing to our world?
Wow, I love that question. You know, I used to primarily work one-on-one, and I still love my one-on-one work. And like I said, I listen. I encourage my clients to be present in the moment, because if you go into the past, that's usually full of regret and remorse. And if you march out into the future, that creates anxiety. And the truth is, the only place we're actually alive in our lives is right here, right now, in the present moment. It's the only place we can create any meaningful change. So that's one of the first things I do. As I mentioned, I use energy psychology modalities. So people are not going to be on the couch for 20 years. You know, they're going to move through their issues much more rapidly. We have these tools now, so why not use them so you can get on with your life as quickly as possible? And then I think, you know, just caring, actually me being present and really caring when I'm with a client, because you know what happens when you really listen and you really care, there's something in the energy that the client's picking up on an energetic level, because we are energy beings, right? And sometimes we don't even know we're tuning into each other's energy, but we always are.
Wow.
So,
well, so we're down to the last minute. What are 2 takeaways that you want our listening audience to take away from this great conversation? Remember, you're coming back. But what are 2 takeaways that you want to leave our listeners?
Well, I think one of the most important things we said early on, James, reach out, get help, talk to someone, because isolation is not a good place to heal. That's really important. And I think the other takeaway may be something like, there's in a course of a day for you, no matter who you are going to encounter people who need connection, whether it's just giving them a smile or listening, really listening to what they're saying. So give them that, connect, because that's what keeps us having meaning in life, and that's what keeps us alive. We got to connect.
Paula, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the James Cooley Show. It's still live, you know, television.
My pleasure.
I got you coming up for radio later on, a couple hours from now.
I know. It's my James Cooley day.
So, thank you so much for taking the time. And I tell you, listen audience out there, watchers, television watchers, you might want to reach out to this great lady. Paula, real quickly, can you tell them how they can get in touch with you if they want to?
Yes, just go to paulashaw.com, and there's information there how to reach me, how to get a complimentary 20-minute consult, and we'll take it from there. Remember,
paulashaw.com. Thank you so much for watching, Paula. Thank you so much. And
my pleasure.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll see you next week. We're picking up 2 days next week. So thank you so much. Talk to you later.
You have this thing called vision. You can kind of see out, but it might not make any sense to you at the time. So we don't like to share these ideas with anybody, because we think that they're going to make fun of us, they're going to laugh at us. We have to share these ideas. We can talk about these ideas. That takes us to the next C, collaborate. Remember, create, collaborate in our communities, in this room, and in and out projects, and other nonprofits, and everything we do. We have to collaborate because we want to make it stronger. We want to be the voice out there that's going to give our communities, our societies, our states, our organizations, an opportunity. So we collaborate, we talk about it, we build upon these things. Because you might have some ideas that she might not have, and he might not have some ideas that he might not have. But if we talk about these things, we work with these things, we come up with the best possible plan and solution to move forward. So create, collaborate.
Hey, hold on, Paula. I'm gonna end the broadcast so that they could.
Okay.